Lemon64 presents a play guide and video review. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi once again, welcome to another Lemon64 play guide and review. In this week's show, we'll be taking a look at Thundercats, released on the Commodore 64 in 1987 and published by Elite Systems. Here it is, the review and play guide to Thundercats. And I remember playing this game a lot back in the day, and I could get well up to maybe level 6 of the 14 levels there are in this game by playing without the cheat. But back in the day I always used cheat modes to practice on games, and I certainly do not do that anymore. But you can find pokes and things in magazines. Sometimes you could type listings in, sometimes you could type things in on the title screen, and that would give you infinite lives. In this case, I remember playing this game so many times with infinite lives that I could get most of the way through it without having the aid of that cheat. But it's been quite some time since I played this game. This is my first and only try, so let's try it with the infinite lives switched on, because I know how merciless this game can be to the unpracticed, and you really have to be a veteran of this game to get anywhere with it. The game begins with a great title theme by Rob Hubbard and the Thundercats logo. So let's press that fire button, let's check this game out. In Thundercats we play as Lion-O, and what we have to do is to move from one side of a scrolling level to the other and to take on an array of bad guys. Yes, it's the usual platforming fest, only this time we do not have real platforms to jump onto. Instead we have to walk across the ground and take on all these enemies. Periodically we will find free items hidden away in boxes, and we can simply strike those to blow those open and collect those by colliding into them. Sometimes later on they will give us extra weaponry, and they will also give us some bonus points as well. But the main thing to watch out for on these levels is the time limit, because the time will always be counting down. We can't always afford to be delayed by endless defeats. And of course we only get the 3 lives in this game. Ordinarily I would have been dead maybe 10 seconds into this review. On the second level of the 14 we gain our second weapon, and that's a blaster, and we can use the blaster to shoot things from a distance. According to the manual, the player is supposed to be able to swap weapons with the 1 and the 2 key, although I'm not quite sure if this works. Some of the bonuses hidden away on those shelves are actually retrograde, and they will give us back the Sword of Omens, which is not the best weapon to tackle this game, so as soon as you have that blaster, I'd forget the Sword of Omens completely. But as those boxes are not labelled, sometimes you can pick that up and there's nothing you can do about it, except for watch out for that next time you play the game. And this game is very much about trial and error, usually error over trial, and sometimes the enemies appear a little unfair, so it helps to keep on the move at all times. And I found actually rushing through these levels actually works better than simply trying to take our time. By no less reason, because that time limit is merciless, and when we run out of time, just like this, you'll find a diamond strikes us every so often until we finally get to that exit. story goes that Mumm-ras has kidnapped some of our Thundercats, and it's our job to go and rescue those. That was supposed to be the rescue mission to get Tigera, and we only get the one chance. If you fail, unfortunately, you'll have to progress on to that next level. And here we go, this is the Garden of Elements, and we can tackle this garden in any order. I remember I could get through 3 of the 4 of these levels on just the normal lives, but one of these 4 is merciless, and you have to know how to tackle this by repeatedly taking our time and getting through these levels, knowing the enemy patterns and knowing what to do. Sometimes if the enemies are appearing from both sides, it doesn't give us anything we can do, and so we can't always anticipate this unless we've played the game a million times already. I think it's funny that those eyeballs make a great sound when they get destroyed, and that's a bit like a farty noise, and I'm not above that farty noise making me laugh. But that's one of the few things that makes me laugh about this game, because the average player will not get anywhere with it, and even the pro will find this game so intense with that time limit that they probably won't be able to take the time and enjoy it. In fact, I seem to think that this path on the elementary trail is actually the hardest. I seem to remember that these birds on this path are somewhat of a problem. So maybe I've actually chosen the hardest of the levels first. And finally we get to that exit with plenty of time to spare. But if we try to milk those points, you can forget it. So let's just get to that exit, and we get a score for the time remaining and a kill bonus as well. Up the air option, so let's go for fire, and I think fire is a little bit easier, at least I seem to remember so, but of course you know when to duck and when to not to duck, and sometimes in this game it frightens the heck out of people before they've even tried it. That's the hard part over with, and now we get into a very Star Wars-like land speeder, and using that land speeder we can now blow away all those enemies and match their speed, which means that we should have an easier time playing this game from here on in. And this was always my favourite level of the levels in Thundercats. But of course playing this right now, I feel like an idiot because I'm dying left, right and centre. I think sometimes the controls in this game are only just good enough to be able to compete with the action, and sometimes only just barely, with microseconds to spare because you have to take on one thing before you can destroy another, and if you happen to have the wrong weapon at the wrong time, sometimes it can be a real pain. But I'm glad to say the controls on this vehicle that we're driving and the speed that we can fire those fireballs is welcome. And as I say, that's one of the levels that I used to be able to complete, and sometimes I used to be able to speed through that very quickly. Let's check out the water, and in the water section, which is level 5, depending on the levels that we're playing, of course we can choose the levels in any order at this point, and it gives us that level 5 on the very bottom of the screen. The 9 you can see depends on the number of white boxes we've collected, and that's supposed to be able to clear all enemies off the screen with 9 smart bombs. Unfortunately, the game does not have a smart bomb feature, and there is no key combination to actually activate it. So the 9 is irrelevant, and you can see an arrow which is pointing the way to go on every single level, so that you can't get lost. All you have to do is to follow that arrow and make sure you get there before the time ticks all the way down. As you can see, the water section used to be my second favourite level in this game, and with patience you can romp straight through it, and it's a high blasting action fest. And again, if you rush through the game and treat it gung-ho, sometimes it can reward the player, and sometimes you can get through it. And if you try to take your time, sometimes it punishes the player badly. Let's choose the final direction on the path of elements. We've managed to bump down to Earth, and actually we'll have to follow the arrow to find out which way we are going. Sometimes you can actually go the wrong way. And the Earth path reveals Mumm-ras, and you'll have to take on Mumm-ras a number of times, and you'll have to whack him a number of times very hard and very repeatedly in order to get rid of him. And if you stand back, then hopefully his firepower won't reach us, and then when that bounces overhead we can step in and finish Mumm-ras. And you can see that the time limit on this level is also quite punishing. The game manual, it clearly says to try to jump over enemies and tackle them from behind if you have any problems, and that seems to work with the guys with the shields in the bonus levels, like the Rescue Tigra, but it doesn't seem to work with Mumm-ras, seeing as our jump is rather pathetic. You can see in the background that we have some trees which move and some rocks in the background, and that gives an illusion of moving through a landscape. They certainly didn't have to put those trees in the background, and hopefully that will mean that we are through the Garden of Elements, and now we are virtually on our own for the last 5 levels of this game. And let's make sure that we are going the correct way, of course, because it's very easy to go the wrong way, and it's very easy to ignore that arrow. And yet again, it gives us less than a minute to reach the end of this level, and if you want those bonuses, like this one is pretty vital, then you will be losing time and actually heading the wrong way, which is not very helpful in this game. So whilst you see me trying to rush the level, I'll just tell you a little bit more background on this game. Because Thundercats on the Commodore 64 was actually started 3 times by Elite Systems, and only one of those actually reached the market. When Elite Systems acquired the Thundercats license in 1987, it was paramount that they had something ready for the Christmas release, because in 1987 Thundercats was hot, and among the kids it was really hot, and so they had to have something out. Unfortunately, they didn't have enough time to really get the job done, and they tried 3 times to try to get that job onto the market. The very first version of this game was commissioned, and they gave Paradise Software the job of creating Thundercats, but unfortunately the game created by Paradise Software was not ready for Christmas. So after Christmas they renamed the main character to Sir Arthur, and they tried to get Capcom to buy the game as a sequel to Ghosts and Goblins. Unfortunately, Capcom had already started their own sequel, known as Ghouls and Ghosts, and so they turned them down, and Elite Systems changed the hair of the main character to blonde, and they released the game by Paradise Software as Beyond the Ice Palace in 1988. Just in case Thundercats wasn't ready by Paradise Software, which mutated into Beyond the Ice Palace, actually Elite Systems created an in-house second version of Thundercats, and yet again the in-house second version was not ready in time for Christmas. They managed to get the theme music correct from Thundercats. They had a main character with red hair jumping all around the screen, but when it was not ready in time for Christmas 1987, they renamed the game Bomb Jack 2, and that's why Bomb Jack 2 has the Thundercats theme within it and the same main character as Lionel. When it became clear that both versions of Thundercats were going to be delayed, unfortunately Elite Systems had to commission a third version of the game, which was ready, and this was again by Gargoyle Games, known as Wolf. And Wolf is actually the game that you are looking at the moment. Originally the moon rose and the main character changed into a wolf, which gave him special abilities, a bit like Altered Beast. And the moon was supposed to rise in the background, and if you didn't make it in time, the moon would cast a moonbeam down and strike you away. And that was changed to a diamond for this game, but you may notice the main character in Wolf still has the dark grey hair and the wolf's mane. With not much time remaining, yet again, we managed to reach the end of the platform, and that marks the end of the level. That's wonderful. It means that we get to move on to the next one, and there aren't too many levels left in this game. We're now on to level 11. The programmer of this game, as can be seen on the loading screen, was a certain Mr. Ted Wolf, and Ted Wolf created Wolf, and then Elite Systems renamed it to Thundercats, and the maker of the title music was Rob Hubbard, who has no invoice for this game from Elite Systems, but he does have an invoice from the game Wolf by Gargoyle Systems, where he was commissioned to create an intense action combat theme like the Lone Wolf. And so that's why the title music sounds a lot more action-packed, like the SAS theme, than it does actually the Thundercats theme music. Notice all the enemies from Wolf have survived, i.e. bats and people with masks and axes, and all the people that you would expect to find in a kind of a medieval game based on vampires and wolves and that kind of thing. Well, this game has the Thundercats logo periodically, and of course the Thundercats is there to remind us that we are playing a Thundercats game. But to my mind it looks more like maybe the Star Wars game, which appeared on the NES in 1991, especially with the land speeder, and you have to wonder even in a game like Wolf where the land speeder came from, because that isn't usually an effect of the 16th century. The dark skulls you can see moving on the very top of the screen are actually waypoints. Not that that really matters in a game like this, because you won't be very much dying and reaching those waypoints, because you'll be dying and ending the game. And the game is so frustrating and unforgiving that this is certainly NES hard on a Commodore 64. Hopefully now we can get through a few more sections without that annoying jumping sound every 5 seconds. And we've managed to reach Wily Kit. Well, we can reach Wily Kit for a bonus, and again it's the same type of level as before. You'll mainly find guys with shields. As far as I know, the guys with shields have to be jumped over and hit from behind, otherwise won't affect those guys and you can't do anything about it, and you'll have to really hit those guys multiple times. Maybe the blaster can help, you maybe have to hit those 20 times with that thing, and sometimes you can and sometimes you certainly can't. And I'm actually trying to jump over that guy the easy way, but unfortunately with this amount of time and only one life, it isn't actually possible to complete that mission. Level 14, the final level of this entire game, and if we manage to complete this, we will be given a congratulations screen. We will not fight Mumm-ras again. We've already fought Mumm-ras a number of times, and that's it. All we have to do now is to survive this level and escape. A bit like Star Wars, we'll have to find some transport, and then we'll have to negotiate this level at high speed. And you can see the arrow at the bottom of the screen is giving us a directional indication, and unfortunately for me that is actually the way out and not actually the way that I'm supposed to be going. But how is the player supposed to know that, having never played this game before? So let's follow that arrow and hope that it leads somewhere, and unfortunately for us it actually leads to a dead end, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. Taking a look at the scores, and thanks once again to Sheldon Cooper on the Lemon64 website, we actually gained some scores on the database, and he wrote down that Commodore user gave this game 60%, Zap gave Thundercats 74%, the Games Machine gave this game an incredible 87%, and C&VG originally awarded it 90% in December 1987, and only lowered that to 87% for the budget release, released December 1989. And that would have given this an incredible 8 out of 10 as an average score. Luckily, the Lemon reviewers have given this an average of 55% currently on the Lemon database, and that pulls the average score down to 7 out of 10, somewhere in that region. And I would say that's still an overreach with this game because it's very difficult and it doesn't give any satisfaction to the player. In fact, even practicing this game, degrees of frustration will certainly age the player at least 100 years trying to master it. What I didn't realise, and I found out later on by looking at the long play, I was actually supposed to run to the right here instead of to the left, and I was supposed to collect another land speeder, simply speed through this level and hop over this wall. But I didn't know that because the arrow is pointing to the right. Eventually I will get this idea and start to move right in the footage, but I got bored and switched this off before I eventually found the vehicle that I needed, so unfortunately I never did get to complete this game, even with infinite lives. But you can see it is a very tough game, and it is a game that, even though I played back in the day, it's certainly one that really encourages the player to use infinite lives, because without infinite lives it's an absolute massacre. and you probably won't get anywhere, particularly not over level 3, which is the breaking point of most players. This reminds me very much of the escape from the Death Star sequence at the end of Return of the Jedi, where we're supposed to collect an item and rush through to the exit, and that would complete the game. And as I say, this game does seem to have more in common with the NES Star Wars game, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with it. And those games were of course developed independently. Maybe this was supposed to be Star Wars and the sword was supposed to be a lightsaber, but as far as I know, like I say, it's supposed to be Wolf, and they simply changed the name Wolf because Wolf was ready and none of the Thundercats games were ready. And if you want to hear that Thundercats theme, then you'll have to play Bomb Jack 2, and if you want to play the original intended Thundercats, then you'll have to play Beyond the Ice Palace. Even though I landed on the correct platform, unfortunately I still cannot make it to the end of this game, so unfortunately I'm going to have to leave it there. So thank you once again for viewing another Commodore 64 play guide and review, and I hope to see you soon in the next one. Thank you.